sex positive, more like HIV positive. Welcome to Common Filth Radio, episode 16. Thank you for listening. Hope you all had a good Thanksgiving. If you like the show and want to support it, you can click on the link below this video, which will take you to Amazon.com. And if you open that link or tab, search for your product, add to your cart, and check out, I get a percentage of your total purchase at no additional cost to you. Apparently, the powers that be have nothing better to do than to lecture us about rape culture these days. If you watch football at all, which I do, you see these ads of these athletes telling you, no more of this, no more of that, and it's usually something excusing sexual assault or domestic violence. Excuses you've never heard from any normal person, but people hear it on TV and they assume that's how it is and that they're missing out on something. I have never heard the term boys will be boys in response to them raping somebody, to them taking advantage of somebody while they're drunk. In fact, I've never seen this at all. What kind of people are you hanging out with that you think this is how things go? To the professional athletes lecturing me about rape culture, and something else that I'll mention later. I don't hang out with wife beaters. I don't hang out with rapists. You are the wife beater. You are the rapist. I don't remember the hubbub about domestic violence when Ray Caruth killed his baby mama and crippled his unborn child for life. If you're not familiar with the Ray Caruth incident, this was back in the 90s. He was put in jail for conspiracy to commit murder and other things because he and some associates he stopped his car in front of his the mother of his child, pregnant at the time. He stopped his car in front of hers, and another car pulled up beside her vehicle and shot her. That killed her, and the baby she was pregnant with, last I read, had a lot of health problems. But this guy, he was still under contract with the Carolina Panthers when this incident occurred, and I don't recall any ad campaigns released in response to this. There was no moralizing. This guy was clearly a criminal. He was dealt with, and that was that. No one said, oh, Ray Caruth, he a good boy, he didn't do nothing. And this was back in 1999. Not that long ago. And look how far we've fallen. I bet if he did something like that now, everybody would be all over, oh, he's a good boy. He's a gentle giant or something. On second thought, no, he didn't do anything to a cop, so he doesn't get a free pass. But let's look at the inverse of this incident, which happened a short time after the Ray Caruth business went down. This involves a player named Fred Lane, who was also a member of the Carolina Panthers at some point, but he was a member of the Indianapolis Colts when he was killed. He was killed not by any ordinary circumstances. I'll read directly from Wikipedia. I have a decent account of it here. On July 6th, the year 2000, Fred's wife, Deidre Lane, shot and killed Fred. Fred's keys were still in the lock, and Fred had been shot twice with a 12-gauge shotgun, once in the chest and a second time in the back of the head, apparently at point-blank range. Deidre Lane pleaded guilty to voluntary manslaughter in 2003, 3 years after her estranged husband was found fatally shot inside their home. Prosecutors at her sentencing described Deidre Lane as an abusive woman who killed her husband for insurance money. Defense attorneys called her a battered wife who killed in self-defense. A judge sentenced her to 7 years and 11 months, ruling her actions were premeditated and deliberate, that she acted with malice and shot him a second time after he'd already been rendered helpless. She received credit for jail time served waiting on a federal charge of conspiracy to commit bank larceny. She pled guilty and served 4 months for that charge. She was released on March 3rd, 2009. So, an egregious offense. Another domestic offense that saw her go to jail for a mere 7 years, 7.5 years, for doing basically the same thing that Ray Caruth did. I mean, you could easily argue that what he did was worse, but murder is murder. Unless, of course, you are a woman, then it's manslaughter. And this is not the only example of a football player, former football player, getting killed by their lady. Back in 2009, former Titans and Ravens quarterback Steve McNair was killed. He was a married man, had children, and had a 20-something mistress who got very angry that he was using her as the side piece. So she killed him while he was sleeping and then turned the gun on herself. I mean, adulterer or no, murder is murder. Punishment doesn't exactly fit the crime there. And in the 2009 season, I don't remember seeing one ad about don't kill your spouse, don't kill your lover, don't kill the guy using you as a side piece. None of that. I don't recall this year of arrests in professional football being any better or worse than previous years. Yeah, you had a couple of high-profile players getting in trouble, but high profile or no, these things still happen regardless of whether or not they're paid more attention to. So we've pointed out the hypocrisies, but I think that there's a deeper underlying issue here. Because you could argue that, well, the NFL was different at the time. It wasn't as focused on as it is now. There's a different commissioner back then. All very true points. But here's the underlying issue. And I'm going to expose this by reading the arrests this year. Pro Football Talk has a police blotter where they list every arrest of every football player. By the way, if Pro Football Talk knew what they were exposing by having this X amount of days since arrests ticker up, they would probably take it down. And maybe they will once I get through with this. We'll start with the most recent. Jaguars cornerback Dwayne Gratz is arrested for disorderly intoxication and trespassing. Broncos safety John Boyette is charged with misdemeanor assault. Vikings defensive tackle Tom Johnson is arrested for trespassing and disorderly conduct. Dolphins defensive end Derek Shelby is arrested for trespassing and resisting arrest. Colts wide receiver Derek Rogers is arrested for DUI. Vikings running back Adrian Peterson surrenders on charges of reckless or negligent injury to a child. 49ers defensive end Ray McDonald is arrested for domestic violence, which he was recently cleared of. Bills defensive tackle Alan Branch arrested for DUI. Steelers Le'Veon Bell, running back, arrested for marijuana possession and DUI. At the same time, the Steelers running back LeGarrette Blount is arrested for marijuana possession, but he's no longer with them. So those are all the arrests from August until now. There's a lot more that happened this year, but that would take a long time. But what is the common thread through these arrests? Someone I know came up with this euphemism, and this euphemism I'm about to use is people of soul. People of soul. The NFL has a people of soul problem. But they will never acknowledge this, either them or the media that covers them. They'll never acknowledge this. Because the NFL is just another gatekeeper for the forces of cultural Marxism. Only a very specific group of people is responsible for this. For the recent PR troubles they've been having. But they won't acknowledge that. Because there's a war on noticing. And if you need more evidence of this, recall to a few months ago back in Arizona, where a religious freedom bill was passed, and the NFL threatened to take away the Super Bowl from Arizona if they passed this law, if this law was signed by their governor. And this law was apparently going to oppress some poor, they're just like you and me, except happier and better Americans. So the NFL is like, oh, well, we gotta step in here. And yet they'll apologize for penalizing a player for doing a Muslim prayer in the end zone. As Ramsey Paul calls them, Finns, the Finns that run the NFL. Well, they do. They do. Look at who the owners are. And the sports media that covers them, the mainstream media, they'll sneer at people like Tim Tebow, yet they'll cheerlead idiots like Chris Cluey, who defends they're just like you and me except better, except happier and better Americans. They'll give him a pass. Now, I hate to make overgeneralized statements, but Americans are a rootless people. So they look to things like sports as a moral authority. If you press them, they'll be like, no, that's ridiculous. But their actions indicate that they treat sports as a moral authority. This is why they cheer on teams full of people that don't even look like them, that don't even share the same culture as them. This is why they show vitriol towards athletes that do look more like them in favor of these super athletes who have that perpetual upside. He's got so many tools, he's got upside. He's never done shit with it, but that upside. Whites in America are racial eunuchs. Whites in Europe are racial eunuchs. Getting cuckolded repeatedly by people they view as superior for no good reason. But sports media being an extension of the mainstream media, the powers that be, I think that's the next great frontier with regard to alternative media. Because alternative sports media is completely non-existent. Could you imagine the shitstorm that would be caused if you or me wrote an article about how SEC football stadiums are open-air plantations for whites? College football is a more direct form of cultural Marxism because a lot of the major football programs, they are running at a profit, and the university likes that because they can fund the fancy new women's studies building. They think to themselves, finally, we can finally start our school of social justice, give out bachelors and masters in social justice. Thank you, idiot white football fans. But I like the idea of alternative sports media, but the more I think about it, the more I realize that it would be a very, very, very niche market because most sports fans are politically, socially, culturally inert. And even if they are of some healthy political, ideological bent, they usually view sports as separate from it. That's why they like it. It's an escape. But it's not an escape anymore. Politics has entrenched itself firmly into the world of sports. It has become something very ideological. But unfortunately, in a democratic society, culture, perception, if it is common enough of one, becomes reality. So even if we were going to start some sports outlet and make it at least semi-popular, people would eventually turn a blind eye to it because they would think to themselves, man, why you got to bring politics into this? Why you got to make it a race thing? I just want to get away from this. Well, you might want to get away from this, but it doesn't want to get away from you. And I didn't make it a racing or a political thing. It made itself that way. We're simply stating the truth. Like I said earlier, the NFL is the one that's lecturing me about rape culture through its mandatory public service announcements in its commercial breaks. The NFL is becoming Tumblr. It's being staffed by Tumblristas. So that was a long thing, wasn't it? But shows you some of the glaring hypocrisies involved with professional sports, the NFL in particular. But another thing that reminded me of rape culture and Tumblr and the patriarchy was some ad I saw before the movie was starting when I saw a movie last week. I'm not going to mention it because it's not worth mentioning, but the movie anyway. But the ad it started out as a close-up of some strung out chick leaving a bedroom at some party, giving dudes some bedroom eyes, laughing, giggling, inebriated clearly, but whatever. And then it zooms in on some kid on the couch and the screen says, oh, this isn't an ad about sexual assault. It's about one that stops it or whatever. And I just thought it was completely stupid. Like I said earlier about the professional athletes telling me, oh, end sexual assault and domestic violence. How can I end something if I never start it? I don't engage in these things myself, and I don't know anybody that does. So, what is there to stop? I've created a healthy social environment for myself. I have a good judge of character. And with respect to this ad, which was done by something called Generation Progress, which I have looked up, I'm going to talk about that a little bit. I don't hang out at parties where people are getting inebriated and where rapists hang out. In fact, I don't think that anybody hangs out at these places because they'd rather spend it on their iPhone or on Tumblr. They don't want to spend it with friends at a restaurant or at a friend's apartment. They want to either go to some retarded party where they think that there's going to be no consequences if they put themselves in compromising situations, which is not to say that it's deserved, but let's not confuse it here. If you don't put yourself in a compromising situation, chances are nothing's going to happen. The idea is that you control your behavior. You can't control other people's behavior. So what cracks me up when these idiots say, "Oh, we need to teach men not to rape," not I don't need to get blackout drunk in public. You know, not one time in my childhood, not one time in my adolescence was I told by any of my parents, any adult authority figures, don't rape people. They did a good enough job to where I already had a moral compass. I knew that these things were wrong. If you do a even average job at parenting, your children are going to know. Don't commit crimes. Crimes are not something that decent people commit. Rape is a crime. Therefore, you're not going to commit it. And the reason why you have so much droning on about rape culture, I think, is because these children were not raised by their parents, decent parents. They were raised by the state, which is why they want to be teachers or look to teaching, the profession and their teachers with affection. Millennials have a guilty conscience because look at the quality of teachers. Look at who teaches. Creeps who want to hang out with children all day as a career. Do you trust anybody who wants to do that? I certainly don't. And it's not as if millennials see these people this way. It's just these people are this way. They transmit a certain set of values. Therefore, you get people on Tumblr leeching out into the real world. These people don't understand that do not do evil, and generally evil will not be done to you. Because they aren't taught good and evil. They're taught moral relativism. That whatever's in their own head, well, that's what's okay. And that's why they say that's not okay instead of that's wrong. Because they have no real sense of right and wrong. And you're saying, well, getting blackout intoxicated isn't evil. Yeah, it is. If you're getting blackout drunk or high somewhere in public, somebody's going to have to take care of that in some way. Someone's going to have to clean the puke up off the floor that you left there. Somebody's going to have to hold your head over the toilet because you don't even know where you are. I had a college roommate once. Came home completely wasted. He was going to choke on his own vomit if I didn't hold his head into a cooking pot. And that's what I did. I was not drunk because I was not with him. But he came home. And he didn't even remember it. And of course, now, if these people are listening in this far, which I doubt, they're going to say, well, you're justifying rape. No. What I'm saying is that if you're behaving in an evil fashion, evil attracts evil. Rape is evil. Like the earlier example I used with Steve McNair, what he did was evil. Evil was done to him. We are taught that strict social standards by which to live are bigoted. They're bad. They're made up by old white men who didn't know anything because they didn't have a Tumblr blog with 15 followers. So now, You're told after paying $10.50 for your movie ticket to not rape by these jackasses at something called Generation Progress. I'm on the ideas part of genprogress.org. Some news headlines they have. Issue brief. A DACA has improved the lives of undocumented young people. August marked the 2-year anniversary of the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals program. Apart from temporarily deferring their deportations from the U.S., DACA also gives eligible undocumented youth and young adults access to renewable 2-year work permits and social security numbers. On the same page, fact sheet: the state of the economy for young Californians. Millennials face an increasingly difficult route as they strive for economic stability, facing high rates of and underemployment and the long-term impact of student loan debt. Let's play spot the contradiction here. Pretty easy to win this game. Why are you and underemployed, young Californians? Could it be those undocumented youth who are just here for a better life? Oh no, we can't think about that. That's evil. That's wicked. But I'm sure those undocumented youths will really appreciate the gesture of racial justice when you took out that loan for Chicano literature. But speaking of California, this reminds me, the Atlantic posted a map, a state-by-state poll showing what people are most thankful for. May it come as no surprise that the most frivolous of things that people are thankful for comes from California. California is most thankful for YouTube. YouTube. People in Vermont and New Hampshire are most thankful for Pinterest and Netflix. People in Virginia are most thankful for YouTube. Same as California. Other frivolous things from other states. Florida, living near the beach. Oregon, yoga. New York, apartment. Yeah, I'm so thankful for my $3,000 a month apartment in a shitty neighborhood. It's all worth it to say that I'm one of however many million people that live in New York City. I am so unique, I am so cool. Which reminds me, I saw an ad for a New York storage company, and they had a billboard that says, "No one ever got famous in Des Moines." Yeah. Sure, a higher percentage of people from Des Moines got famous than the percentage of people that got famous in New York. But that would be playing into their frame. I should say, maybe you should reevaluate your life. Maybe you should pursue something more noble than being famous. But going back to this geography of gratitude map, most of America is pretty frivolous and stupid, but there's some good stuff. Most of the South has to do with mercy, God's forgiveness, God's word, salvation, I think, in the Carolinas. Heavenly Father in Idaho and Utah, not a surprise. Lots of Mormons there. People in Montana, most thankful for their upbringing. And of course, you have some stupid stuff in these flyover states, as New York people would call them, like country music. That's what they're most thankful for in Wyoming. So that's all for this week with regard to the things I want to talk about. So let's get into your emails and Ask FM submissions. You can email me at my email address, which you're looking at right now, or not looking at, either way. It's commonfilth@commonfilth.com. I also have Ask FM. I checked that, so I have the link to that below. You can click on that. A good friend of the show, Mine1001, wrote this email. I'll get to his question, but I would like to read the bit that he wrote to me about fat acceptance. So here it goes. On the point of fat positivity, fat acceptance, whatever else it is called, I think that it is an incredibly disturbing and alarming ideology. We know for a fact that obesity is at epidemic levels in the Western world and is now happening in developing nations like Mexico, India, and China. More and more people are experiencing illnesses caused by obesity, such as heart disease, some types of cancers, diabetes, and physical disabilities, which is putting huge strains on healthcare systems. Some stats even have raised that this generation of children could possibly be the first generation in perhaps 1,000 years that will have a shorter life expectancy than their parents' generation. With all this, fat acceptance is perhaps the most terrifying ideology ever seen. It is a coping mechanism that has now evolved into a cult. People who get absorbed into it think that being grossly overweight is the new normal. Oh, 50% of people are obese. So shouldn't everyone be obese because it's the new normal? Stupid shit like thin privilege is now the parroted mantra that not only people who are fat are repeating, but able bodied thin people are now repeating. I saw this screen cap of a Tumblr post. It may have been on your page, but I can't remember. It was a while ago. Of a teenage boy marveling at the fact that he nearly doubled his body weight in a year. I'm sure many people have read that story of the woman who wore cushions and padding in her clothes so she could experience her true size, and got told she was a loony by a man on the train for it. Through the indoctrinated parrots of the Tumblr echo chamber, people are being told that being thin is wrong. You're shaming society by the fact you can walk 500 meters without experiencing a heart attack. You work hard at keeping fit and healthy by eating well and exercising. The patriarchy strikes again. The other thing that is, as I like to put it, completely fucked about fat acceptance is that medical science has now been twisted to fit their worldview. I read this long rant somewhere about how many doctors and health specialists have said that obesity causes diabetes. This person, if you can call them that, stated that these facts could be destroyed by the fact that non-obese people also have diabetes, which is true, of course. But that doesn't mean that because you're 200 kilos, then you're as healthy as some athlete who runs 5 kilometers every day. The same thing has been done for heart disease, cancer, and other conditions, which some non-obese people have. They have those conditions for other reasons, whether it is genetic or other lifestyle choices like smoking, alcohol, or drugs. But hey, you're incredibly overweight. That instantly makes you the world's foremost medical expert. Very excellent points all around. I probably could not have put that any better. And like I said, there is a question at the end of this email. It says, if you were made supreme overlord of the world for a day and anything you said was law, what would you do? The world's ills could be solved if people would treat themselves with more respect, treat their loved ones with more respect, and showed loyalty towards their families and their people. Because from my perspective, most people will do anything for money. They are loyal to money, not their families, not their nation, not their people, not their culture. So people will forego self-respect and loyalty for the sake of money. No one seems to realize that money is just a means to an end. You sacrifice your time for some productive thing, and you get compensated for it. And you get compensated to a point where you have enough of it so that you could spend extra time with your family. You could spend quality time with your family or loved ones. But more and more people seem to be treating money as an end in and of itself, which is really sad. And this is a form of betrayal. Because look at what multinational corporations do. They have incredibly draconian speech policies, where if you criticize any group, they call that discrimination. And discrimination is bad for the bottom line, because they need that little niche market of, the 0.2% of people that'll buy it because they saw a commercial that gave them the warm fuzzies because they belong to this stupid identity group. Jack Donovan discussed this extensively at the most recent American Renaissance Conference. How corporations don't want to exclude because it's bad for the bottom line. And in doing that, they're destroying notions of family and tribe. And if people don't have a family or a tribe, they have no loyalty. Rather, they have a loyalty to strange ideas which are born of consumerism. So, I mean, you could tell people to be loyal and have self-respect, but that's not really a law. You can't enforce that. But what you can enforce are corporate speech policies. So I guess when it comes to laws, if I were supreme overlord, I would make it illegal for corporations to adopt and enforce these speech policies. That took some beating around the bush, exploring that idea. But I think that's most effective because you can't escape the influence of multinational corporations, and minimizing that influence, I think, would give rise to a new tribalism, a new nationalism to some extent. All right, next question. This one is from Han Solo. In your opinion, what do you think the average man or woman of today's values are? What about their qualities? On the other hand, what do you think the ideal man or woman's values should be? What about their qualities also? I would also like to say your advice you give during the show is very helpful. I remember you talking about in a past week's show something about how allowing people into your life or talking to people who are among the common filth slowly turns you into them or leads you astray from living a good and healthy life. I've come to learn that over time, and I hope others who listen to your show learn that too. Well, I'm glad you found value in that advice, because a lot of people they don't take into consideration the character of the people that they accept into their lives. There's a reason why people say that you could tell who a person is by looking at their friends. If you have good, moral, non-criminal friends, you will likely have a good life. But as for your question, I think a good man defends what is rightfully his nation, his family, his home, his property. A good man should labor to better himself for the sake of bettering his family, his nation, and so on. As I've said before, look at men through history. They explore, they create, and they conquer. We sacrifice ourselves for the sake of building something. I read a good quote once, and I wish I remember who posted it and who said it, but society is a man planting a tree whose shade he will never enjoy. That quote is in complete contrast to what I see in the modern man, what I see in modern people. I really can't tell the difference anymore between what traits are manly and what traits are womanly in the modern person, because it all seems to be oriented around this hedonism, this self-satisfaction, and, well, I just want to be happy. Happiness is the enemy. It's like money. If you're pursuing happiness as an end in and of itself, life is not going to work out the right way. If you're just happy all the time, you're not really doing anything. You're not giving back to society or making it better. True happiness, I think, comes from the byproduct of productive energies. Not, oh, I'm happy because I'm happy. I'm happy because I got some new shoes. I'm happy because, I don't know, I got a year free of Netflix. So I see hedonism in both men and women, if you can even call them that. It's too dignified of terms, I think. But I think that female traits, women traits, I think that women should be kind and agreeable. I think that they should tend to their husband's wounds. Or, well, we don't have wounds anymore. We just have like backaches and frustrations with managerial busy work. But regardless, a woman is best at supporting the home. Like, I saw this slam poetry video. I don't know how I ended up there, but I did. And there's this woman on stage shouting about her shitty childhood and how her dad was an asshole. And that she brags later on that she doesn't know how to cook. There's really no better way of saying thank you to your husband, boyfriend, whatever, than giving them a meal after a hard day's work. Them serving other people. Because the modern workplace is inherently unmasculine. The service economy is completely anti-male. Men do not exist to serve, we exist to do shit. We exist to build. We exist to conquer, not serve. And the feminists would like to drone on, especially in that video that I just mentioned. Which, by the way, since when is poetry acting like a neurotic shitbag on stage? Just wondering, when did that occur? If a man doesn't appreciate the things a woman does for him, then he's not worthy of their time. If a woman puts her best foot forward and says, look, honey, I made you this food, and he says, fuck you, I'm gonna do what I want to do, and act like I have no loyalty towards you. Well, you know what? Then that is a bad person, and feminism cannot cure people's unkindness to each other. Women are also good at bringing their community together. I've noticed this growing up myself. It was always the ladies who get people together for some barbecue or movie night or whatever. People will generally do these things that they're good at because they do it out of passion, or rather, they have a passion for these things, therefore they're good at it. Yeah, and it makes them feel good and it brings some fulfillment to their lives. If they are left alone, they will do it, but you have an entire system telling them no, staying at home and caring for the home is a bad thing. And men are told that they're evil because they have leadership positions at the expense of women, and we should just step aside because we're being oppressive by our very existence. Social pressures matter a lot. I mean, you can only suppress nature for so long, but nurture can prevail for a time. Women are shamed for wanting to do womanly things, men are shamed for wanting to do manly things, and androgyny seems to be the order of the day because that's what's good for global capitalism. That's what's good for the bottom line. If people are not different, then they all want to buy the same things. If they're all buying the same things, that's guaranteed income for the powers that be. Another example of people shaming women, or the idea of what it is to be a woman, is these people who say, oh, you just want your woman to be barefoot and pregnant at home all day. As if being barefoot and pregnant is something inherently shameful. Let me tell you what's inherently shameful. Sitting on Tumblr all day liking fucking Doctor Who pics or whatever it is, and in between those likes posting about how oppressive the patriarchy is. Shameful is eating Doritos all day, drinking Mountain Dew out of your male tears cup, and saying about how we need to be more body positive and fat positive. That's shameful. Much more shameful than being pregnant and barefoot and cooking lunch for your husband. And men are guilty of this too in different ways, like these guys that pose with why I need feminism. Like recently, I saw that picture again about this hipster looking dude, very swipple looking guy. He's holding up he's holding up a sign that says I need feminism because I don't want to feel unmanly for enjoying my girlfriend's strap on. That is shameful. Another example are these male feminists who are like, oh, we need less white heterosexual males in all parts of life. Okay, then kill yourself. Oh, well, because they're so self-oriented that because they got a good grade in a class saying that white patriarchy is evil, that's what they live for, and they get the warm fuzzies from that. But if they follow the ideology they're spewing to its logical conclusion, well, they would stop and say, oh, well, that's taking it too far. Starting to get itchy from all these terrible examples of terrible people. So, thank you for the question. We're going to move on to the Ask FM segment of the show where I answer questions from Ask FM. This one's from the Anti-Democracy blog, a friend of mine. You can check them out at ask.fm/antidem or antidem.wordpress.com. Good stuff over there. The question goes, what do you make of Gamergate? Do you think, as I do, that a few years from now, a lot of people entering the reactosphere will say that Gamergate was their red pill moment? From what I gather, Gamergate is a centrist, bordering on libertarian movement, but I, once upon a time, would have considered myself a libertarian. So if Gamergate spurred them towards more of the libertarian side of things, if a lot of those people continue their development, they'll end up where you and I are. The people involved with Gamergate have been going toe-to-toe with the social justice people for months now, and I hope that they either remind themselves or somebody reminds them that these are leftists they're dealing with. I would hope that these people who have egalitarian leanings in Gamergate would remind themselves that by saying that, oh, we're true egalitarians, the social justice fanatics are not, I would hope that they would stop that thing and saying, wait a minute, maybe this whole equality thing isn't the way to go. So I worry about that, but at the very least, I think that the pushback that Gamergate has provided will give us better pop culture. Um, it will be, I hope it will be less concerned with pushing an agenda and more about providing an interesting experience that isn't necessarily ideological. So I'm optimistic that any sort of storytelling will become less soapboxy, less explicitly ideological. Thunderfoot posted a good video that I watched a part of about Anita Sarkeesian's master's thesis, which in her thesis she admits that she watches thousands of hours and thousands of hours of TV shows and movies in researching her thesis, which goes to show you the state of academia, but that's not the main point. The main point is that she says that everything reflects some sort of values, some sort of value in her feminist frequency videos, and that's kind of silly because film and TV, while a heavily distorted view of reality, still take some constructive portion of life and display it. And so you can't escape values in that respect when you're dealing with people, but when you're dealing with video games, most video games create a highly artificial environment, highly stylized environments that have very little to do with people beyond those that play it and those that create it. Look at a wildly popular game like Minecraft. Exactly what values are they expressing in that would somehow be anti feminist or pro feminist? The game doesn't have anything to do with reality other than its own little self contained one. But the pop culture critics don't talk about stuff like that, which I think make up the majority, not necessarily games like Minecraft, but games that are self contained and narrowly focused. They don't talk about those because there's no way they can be warped and misrepresented to fit some sort of agenda. So, people with reactionary ideas, more people with reactionary ideas coming from Gamergate, I don't know. I could see it happening, but I'm not confident, terribly confident in people's development in terms of the ideas that they hold. People generally, they reach a certain point and they stop because playing with ideas is exhausting and there are more productive things to be done in their eyes anyway. I certainly find value in questioning previously held ideals and notions. But thank you very much for the question. It's a pleasure as always. All right, last question. This is from Ask FM again, and this one comes anonymously. Hey, Colin, Filth, sorry if you've answered these before, but I would like to ask some personal questions. What is your occupation? Have you watched any Red Letter Media? If so, what is your opinion on them? And thank you for opening my eyes to joining a church. I joined one, and it really is a good experience. I am presently self-employed through an online sales outlet, which I will not share the details of because I may have certain enemies out there, and I don't want them leaving me negative reviews on the various platforms I sell through. So I keep myself pretty busy with all that. And as for Red Letter Media, I'm familiar with them. I initially became familiar with them like everybody else did in the 2009-2010 area when their Plinkett reviews got popular, and I think that you could learn more about filmmaking from those reviews than you can in any amount of time you'd spend in film school. I think Mike or Jay in an interview admitted that, yeah, they went to film school, but it was a complete waste of time, and I agree. That quote I read from a short while ago by Werner Herzog, you could apply it to the same thing. If you want to make good movies, go out and live life. Don't go to art school because you're just going to receive nothing but validation for the nonsense that you do. So if you're looking to go to art school or film school, don't. Just go out and live life and watch Mr. Plinkett reviews if you want to make some movies. But I'm glad that you're going to church and you found some church that you enjoy going to, because a church can provide you with a good community, a good sense of community, a good network of decent people. Good friends are very important to have. Thanks a lot for the question. So, that exciting announcement that I promised you at the end of last episode. I'm currently working on a best of 2014 compilation of this show. I'm going through each episode and picking out the best parts from each of them and going to be compiling it and remixing it, making it louder. Because a common complaint that I got on the earlier episodes was that the episodes were too quiet. So I'm going through plucking out the best segments from those episodes and putting them all into a compilation. And that will be releasing through Bandcamp. I'll have the release date for you next week, and it's not just going to be the best of the episodes that I release on YouTube. You're also going to be seeing some never before heard material in that collection. So very exciting. I've been working on it the last few days. I have about 40 minutes of content compiled into the collection so far, and I hope to get it up to at least 2 hours from collecting from again all the episodes in 2014. So very excited for that, and again there will be some exclusive content on that as well. So release date for that coming next week. I will be sharing the URL of the Bandcamp that I set up once that is released, and yeah, I'm really excited for it, and I hope you're excited for it as well. So, with that being said, there is nothing else left to say, at least for this week. So, keep sending in your questions, commonfilth at commonfilth.com, or my Ask FM URL below. As always, I appreciate your listening. It means the world to me, and I'll see you again next week.